Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at a precision instrument, which happens to be a durometer meter. And what we can use this for is testing different rubber durometers, anything up to 100 on the HA scale of durometer. So what we should be able to do with this is test the handles, the grips on a pair of pliers. I was kind of struggling on how to show what the rubber is like on these, and I came across this meter and I thought maybe this would be a good way to show, because we talked about in the past the Harbor Freight icons have, the older ones are a little bit different than the newer ones. Maybe with this we'd be able to show that. So we're going to experiment today with this and get into it and see what we can do. We're also going to check all of the pliers wrenches that we've previously tested here on the channel. We're going to check the durometer of every single one of these and add it into our spreadsheet. So we'll have quite a bit of testing ahead of us here, but I think it's going to be interesting. And we should be able to have a decent takeaway then of what the durometer of these tools is, or the handles, and then we should have something to kind of guide us in future when we see a number. If you have a pair of pliers or something, then you'll have an idea what the durometer is, and if you like it, then when you're seeing the videos, we'll continue to use this as we move forward. When you see that number, you'll have an idea of what the grips feel like. Okay, so what is durometer? Durometer is very close to the HRC scale, or the Rockwell scale, for plastics, rubbers, any polymers, and that would be the Shore scale. Now this is a Shore A scale durometer. Durometer is not the official unit of measure, it's Shore A, and Shore A runs from 0 to 100 HA on the tool. So that's what the durometer is, and this meter is going to tell us on the Shore A scale what hardness it is. So we're going to get started with our Icon version 1 pliers and just see what we have for a durometer. So all we got to do is push this in as hard as we can, hold it flush. We could see we have an HA of 70, or our durometer scale goes to 70. If we go to our Icon version 2, I don't know if they're consistent, but we're going to find out. You can see this is much softer. This is a 56.5 or 56, somewhere in that range. I believe the factor of safety on this thing, I guess you're supposed to take it at a few different spots. So we could do that. When we do the test, we'll test them at 2 spots. I gotta pick something that's kind of flat. So here's a flat area. We have a 71.5, and let's go right there. We have a 72.5. So that's pretty safely in the 72, I would call it. Let's do the same spots here on this one. We have a 64. We have a 66.5. So I'd say that's somewhere in the 65 range. So now what that allows us to do is I can stand here and say this new Icon feels a little more gummy than the previous icon, and here on video it's really hard to show that, but if we get in here we can very clearly show that it's a little bit different. So that one's 75 or 71, and this one is in that 60 range. So that shows that they're different. Okay, so next up we're going to test the Knipex and the Klein, and the Knipex is coming in with, I got to get this just flat, 82, and right there an 80.5, so we'll call that an 81, and let's go with an 88 and a 90, so we'll call that an 89. Okay, so now next we're going to have the Vice Grip and the SK. Now both of these have that larger, harder handle. So there's two different durometers that we can test now on each pair of pliers, because we have the rubberized grip, which is what we're going to record on our spreadsheet, but there's also this auxiliary plastic. We should be able to get a durometer off of that, unless it's harder than 100, in which case our meter's not going to work on it. So let's see what we can do here on the Vice Grip. We got to try and get this at different spots. 84.5, 80, 83.5. We'll call that an 82. And now we're going to go down to our SK. We're going to see what we have here. A 90. Oh, that's really skewed. That must not be sitting right. 89.5. And 88. So let's call that see if you see how I have this sitting, I can kind of get a different reading. So I think we're in that 88 range. We'll call it 87 because it was between 88 and 86. Now for the interesting one, let's see if we can get this plastic. I'm going to hold this a little differently. I'm going to hold it like that. We're 90.5. So you can see how that, it all depends on how well it can sit. So if you, the way this tool works is by pushing this plunger in, you're measuring, it's basically measuring the resistance of how much pushback there is. I should probably hold it so it's not a glare, but I can make the scale go. So what you're doing is you're testing the amount of resistance that it takes for the tool to operate. So if we go here where it's relatively flat, that's actually short, a little softer than I was expecting. 88. Could be because it's thin and it's pushing in. That's interesting, because this physically feels harder. It's more of a plastic, but it still has some give to it. Let's see what the SK does. 93, 97, 95.5. So that's definitely harder, which makes sense because it's more of like a plastic other than a rubber. But the SK actually had one of the harder rubbers for all of them. So that actually should, I'm thinking in theory, this should tell us how well this will hold up. And I think that rubber will hold up pretty well on the SK. So next up we have our Phoenix and Ulsa And the Phoenix is an easy one. We're just going to test it at a few spots. 84.5, 83, 82. So it's somewhere in that 85. So it's somewhere around that 85-ish range, let's call it. Which is pretty hard. If you recall, the Klein was kind of in the higher range as well. This is that rubber dipped molding. The Klein was an 89. Now the Ulsa, let's see what this has. We have two different materials, and there's a lot of rounded edges here, so I gotta try and get it that I get the, so 82. Now we're looking more like 75. Gotta watch these contours. Let's go with 73, 74 for that would probably be good. And the red's going to be like an 80 something, a little harder. We got 90 there. Yeah, it's in the 90s. Alright, and that brings us to our last pair that we're going to look at, the Gador and the Capri. Now the Gador has a good spot right here that we should be able to test. 88.5. Probably confirm it right here. About 86. So we'll call that a Gador an 87. And now the Capri, we can take a look at. So what I'm doing here is I'm sighting to see where it's flat. And it's relatively flat there. 73. We'll go somewhere where we know we have a point where we can bury that thing. Somewhere, it's around the same thing. It's in the 70s. That's 70 even. So yeah, I see more 60s than I saw that first 73. There's a 74. There's 73. I wonder if there's inconsistencies in the rubber as well. So there we have, I think we'll call that a 70. And then our plastic, or our blue, 89, 95, 93. You can tell that's definitely harder. Okay, so that gets us up to date on our pliers wrenches. And I think that's something that's just interesting. I was looking for a way that I could show in the videos about how these handles feel. So hopefully that's something that people kind of have an idea of what it's like. And we could go ahead and show some other things that people have to try and give an idea of what things feel like. So what I mean by that is, if we take a look at an M12 tool, this rubber grip that many of us would probably have a reference for of what it feels like, this has a durometer of, it's kind of the low 60s, higher 50s. You see 50 there, 64, so we're between the 64 and 55 range. There's a 66. Again, it's how the tool sits on there. All these rounded objects aren't the easiest, but we should get an idea all the same what that feels like. So that would be an idea of how that would feel. We could do the rubber on an M18 battery. This is a good flat surface. There's a 65. 65, 68, 64. So that would give you an idea as well as far as how the rubber feels on the handles of pliers, just things like that. So another tool to kind of try and show what that feels like, and we'll just add a column to our spreadsheet and keep recording this as we go forward now with various types of tools. So I hope this was interesting. I really enjoy having tools like this around in the shop. I was trying to come up with a way that we could show the handles a little bit better of how they felt. I couldn't think of a good way of saying that other than this one feels more gummy than the others or softer or something like that. I think it's hopefully going to be a good way to show everything. Overall, I think the function of this tool is very simple. It takes an LR44 battery, which is not something I was able to easily find, so that's something to make note of. You put the battery right here in the battery door. It operates really easy. We're using the HRC scale for the jaws and everything else on the pliers, so I was hoping to come up with something that we could use for the handles, which we're going to use the Shore A scale. Check the durometer. It's a very simple tool. I think it's based off of a micrometer that they just transposed the scale in, because all it does is it has this piece here that has a set spring tension to it, and as you push that up, it indents itself into the workpiece, and as you push that up, you increase the number. It's really all that's to it. So it's a pretty simple tool, which is why you can get them relatively inexpensively, and that's great for us. We'll have another point of reference, and I think that is awesome. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I think this is going to be an interesting point of reference as we test more and people have an idea of what something feels like. They're going to get an idea of how they could expect the tool to feel once they get it. So as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.